Juraj Slafkovsky's biggest weakness has been revealed in a recent Athletic article by Arpen. He dives into something Coach Marty St. Louis said back at the draft and what it could mean for Juraj Slafkovsky coming up this season. That plus David Reinbacher's current head coach in Switzerland speaks out on Reinbacher and what he expects for this upcoming year. So you'll want to stick around for this episode of Habs Digest. Jesse, as we get into this, we got to talk a bit about David Reinbacher. And, he's a hot topic this summer. David Reinbacher, he's going to be at the Habs rookie camp. He was the 5th overall pick in this year's draft. And there's a lot of people saying maybe he could make the roster, but probably even more saying he should head back to Switzerland. And his new current head coach, Jerry Fleming, spoke out about him in a recent article with The Athletic. He said he's a pleasant young man, but he couldn't stop talking about how good a player he is. He takes good angles. He reads the rush. He defends going forward. He creates separation. He makes a good pass, good reads, jumps the holes. Everything you could possibly want from a player, he says Reinbacher has. And you can pause here if you want to read this full thing too, but he said, coming up this year, Jesse, he expects his role to expand if he goes back to Switzerland. At the age of 17, doing what he did last year, it can only be expected that he would do even more this year in a league full of guys, like in a league that's similar in talent to the AHL, that's maybe even a bit more skilled and faster. So, I mean, these kind of comments are so amazing coming from his head coach, and you got to think maybe he's trying to convince David to spend one more year over in Europe.
Yeah, well, he's getting a lot of great advice from him as well, which is great to see. And there's actually an interesting connection between Gary Fleming and actually the Montreal Canadiens. Seems like it was all written in the stars for David Reinbacher. Actually played a couple games for the Habs back in the day, but I digress. You know what Gary Fleming is saying to Reinbacher is he's getting ready in Montreal for training camp is embrace the city, embrace the fans. You're part of a world-class organization. Be grateful for this, right? So this is somebody that really understands the game. He's even coaching the AHL, so he's kind of weighing in on where he feels that Reinbacher would be best. Is it with the Habs? Is it in the AHL? Is it back in the Swiss League, which is also very competitive as well? But I liked a lot of his insights. Obviously, somebody that understands the game really well. And one of the big things that he says about David Reinbacher, and possibly a reason why he could make the Habs even this year, is that he's so good at reading angles. He's so good at reading the play, and he's such a great skater that he's able to read the play and then obviously do something about it because he's just so quick, right? And what he also speaks about is that David Reinbacher has an edge, which I don't know about you, Josh, but I still find it surprising. I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'm really happy to hear it. I love it because just he comes across as so mild-mannered, so polite, so friendly and everything else, but make no mistake, he's definitely very competitive at the same time, so just great to hear all these things from somebody who really understands the game. And he also goes on to say lastly that, while there is a chance that he could make the Habs this year, that it's best for him to go when he's completely ready. And maybe he does want to keep him, but I think he does have Reinbacher's best interest in heart at the end of the day, right? So, definitely be interested to see how this develops and where he lands up.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And like you said, he actually coached in the AHL, and who was on his coaching staff but Jean-François Owen, the current head coach of the Laval Rockets. So there are a ton of connections there between Jerry Fleming and the Montreal Canadiens. So, but you got to think, right, with him knowing all these Habs staffers, knowing what's going on, like you said, he knows that David's best interests are at heart. Like, David Reinbacher is going to be with the team that suits him best at the end of the day. And to be honest, I think that might just be Switzerland, right? It'll give him another year against pros, against skilled pros. Look, there are pros and cons to coming over to North America. If he comes to North America, he gets used to the ice a lot faster, and that's something we actually saw Slafkovsky struggle with a lot. But for someone like Reinbacher, who has a bit of that edge, who really doesn't hesitate when players are coming down pressuring him, so that might not be as much of an issue if he's going from bigger ice to smaller ice. But again, his angles, those angles are maybe going to change a bit on smaller ice, but overall, that mentality and knowing when to go for what probably won't. So overall, I think the benefits lie with him going back to Switzerland, but it's very awesome to see his new head coach speak out and clearly be so high on the young star. But Jess, speaking of young stars, oh man, we got some Juraj Slafkovsky stuff. This was an article just posted today by Arpen, and he dove into some stuff that Martin St. Louis said to him at the draft in Nashville about Juraj Slafkovsky. So let's take a look. St. Louis mentioned that he thought Slafkovsky's final game of the season, January 15th at MSG versus the Rangers, was one of his best of the season, and St. Louis said it's because he got touches. As long as you're getting touches, I don't really care what you're doing with it. Now, Arpin did have a go and look through, and he actually didn't have as many touches in that game as some other games in the sample that they looked at. However, in that game, in his final game, he had his highest number of the sample that they had, his highest number of good touches. And that's an objective or a subjective metric made by Arpin Basu. But again, 14 out of 16 of his touches in that game were good touches, essentially leading to a positive outcome. But the biggest weakness for Juraj Slafkovsky came in this small sample size. Again, it was just 9 of his games this season. It's only about, a quarter. But it's his neutral zone touches, Jesse. If you look at this overall, of his 167 touches, 75% of them were positive touches, with 76% positive in the offensive zone, 81% positive in the defensive zone, which is very impressive on its own. In the neutral zone, 66%. And that is just not very good. But it makes sense. It lines up with Slafkovsky's play. What he said, how he's not that comfortable, still getting used to the size of the ice. So with all this said, we know what his biggest weakness is, but we know how Marty wants to fix it. How do you think that might impact Juraj heading into this season?
Well, I think it's very interesting, first off, that, that Martin St. Louis is kind of recognizing, looking back, that, he's a little bit more obvious there on the ice, that he's standing out a little bit more. But for me, I find that this is huge because Marty's obviously somebody that understands the game. Yeah. And Arpin Basu actually did the research on what he was talking about. And he realized that Marty was completely on the nose. And that's that Slav, by getting those touches, you need to read the play. And there's a lot that really goes into that, and you need to really react and put yourself in that position. So there's a lot that goes into that in the NHL, right? So the more that he's going to be able to do that, the more that he's going to have a chance for success. And you saw that really the transition from the European to the North American game, where a lot of those bad touches of once he got the puck were kind of reads of that would work on the European ice, but not quite over here, right? But you saw that even from game to game and within the game that he would adapt. He wouldn't make that same mistake twice. He would really adapt. And then once he got the puck, really knowing what to do, reading that space, which I find is so important, because I think as Habs fans, we feel for Slafkovsky to be effective, he needs to use his skating. And of course, if he is skating and he's been improving in his cardio this offseason, this is going to allow him so much more opportunities in the neutral zone to get the puck, which is really one of his greatest weaknesses, right? But this is one of the areas of the ice where you really need to keep your head up the most, right? Where it can often be the most congested at the same time. So it kind of makes sense, right? But if you if you can master getting those touches in the neutral zone, what is that then going to lead to inevitably? Getting touches in those offensive zone, those offensive scoring chances, everything else. So it's actually so nice to see that with this data from Arpin Basu, a great article from The Athletic here, was that he's understanding the game better, which is so important. He has the skill, right? But it's just such a quickly, just like how Reinbacher will need to learn how to adapt with a little bit more of that pressure. It's the same thing with Slafkovsky, right? So understanding the game better, knowing what to do when you get the puck, I think is going to be huge. And I think just that general understanding that Slafkovsky is going to take that leap this year is going to result in a much different player. I really wouldn't be surprised to see him on the second line by the end of the season.
Yeah, it wouldn't be shocking, especially if, again, he continues to improve his numbers, right? And like you said, right, positive touches in one zone lead to positive touches in the other. If you have more positive defensive zone touches and you can make the plays happen, then maybe you'll be more likely to touch it in the neutral zone and, so on and so forth for the offensive zone. But you're right. Like, Marty is the kind of coach that really likes to teach by example, but also lets you flow within your own game. And clearly Slav had his weaknesses, many weaknesses last year, but he's been working on them. And as the season went on, Coach Marty said, okay, look, just start getting the puck, because if the puck lands on your stick, you probably had to do something good to get in that position, right? And you look through some of the clips that Arpin put in that article, like you see, he's making smart decisions a lot of the time. But again, it's that neutral zone ice where he just looked a little lost. And that's something that can definitely be taught to him. And he's a guy who has clearly shown he has that skill at the NHL level. Well, at least in the international level, he's able to do it. And I think that one fix could solve a lot of Juraj Slafkovsky's problems. And heading into next season, I am extremely excited to see what he has in store. But that'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 10,000 subs. And if you're still watching at this point and you haven't hit that button, why not? You like the video. We have a lot more just like this to come. I'm Josh Gosse for my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.